All right, today we're going to jump into Bitcoin and whether or not it is a bull trap or maybe a breakout in the making. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to Tech Path. As you guys know, we cover all things crypto here, along with some other technology topics, everything from EV innovation to robotics, AI, all those cool stuff that really kind of dives into the future of where technology is going. But today, blockchain is big time in the news, and Bitcoin, of course, is leading the way. In terms of whether or not we've seen this last run being the more bullish run that we've seen, maybe up to that $50,000 to $60,000 mark, the question a lot of people are having is between that 47 and 50K resistance level that seems to be happening with Bitcoin and also to a certain extent with Ethereum, not at that price level, obviously, but there seems to be a little bit of a price resistance. The question will be, is this week the week that it's going to break out? I want to jump to a couple stories here. And of course, one is kind of talking about some of the big price predictions here on both Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple. You know, we cover all three of these here on the channel. We've had some recent data on both Ethereum and Ripple. If you have not checked those videos out, make sure and do so. And in today's video, what I'll do is also give you kind of our own report card, both on Bitcoin, but also on Ethereum, because both of them have a lot of comparisons in terms of how they're tied to each other right now in terms of pricing. But Bitcoin price consolidates along with strategically important 200-day simple moving average. And this, of course, is a little bit lighter volume, which we've talked about last week of potentially seeing a little bit lighter volume. Also, Ethereum price also had a little bit of some strength, but in reality, what we did see is Ethereum kind of regressing just slightly under the $3,300 back into the $3,200 price range over the weekend. And of course, XRP, as we all know, has had just an absolute fantastic run. But Bitcoin enters the weekend, mainly what they were talking about was in a corrective phase. I would say that it somewhat stayed in that price range around the 45 to 46.8 range, which is what a lot of people were looking at. The big issue was whether or not it could make that 47,000 push and really move into the $48,000 and $49,000 range, which a lot of people anticipated that that would not happen this weekend. That seemed to be the case. And when we look at the data, we're also kind of tracing along with that in a little bit more of sideways action. There are some things that I'll talk about here that could be moving Bitcoin into the right direction. And there's just some interesting little scenarios that are kind of jumping into this. Suppose, this is back to the story, suppose Bitcoin does incur a heavier selling pressure. This would be the question, is if there are some people taking some profits in that 46 to 47K range, Bitcoin price should kind of at that point could see a retracement down to the $41,000 and $43,000 range, which would really kind of get it back into that 56-hour SMA, which is around 42,608 is basically what this report says. Much to what we've seen with a lot of the, I'll call them pundits, but also some of the experts, both on the analysis, whether you look at technical analysis or you look at someone that's looking at a stock to flow model or different models out there in just based on volume trading, which a lot of this, as you guys know, we kind of track a little bit different because we look at the indicators that kind of lead on where both volume trading occurs, but also where some technical analysis starts to flow out. And that's based on sentiment, because remember, sentiment is going to drive activity, and it pretty much trumps everything, at least in this space, including volume flow, because in many cases, sentiment will be a pre-leading indicator of how volume flow starts to move. And I want to kind of get into that. However, this was something that a lot of people are concerned about, and that's if we see a daily close around 41,000. This would prompt what some people are saying, and these are the bears, not us, but some of the bears that are out there that have really kind of pushed Bitcoin back into the mid-30 range, happening in August. And I think that's going to be the question mark, is whether or not Bitcoin does get some retracement into this area. We think that this is not likely going to happen in terms of the 40K mark. Now, we could see a retracement down to 42K. But the real question is whether or not we see some big fireworks this week on anything that's happening in and around Bitcoin. And there's a couple things that did release today that might have a little bit of a bearing in terms of where the direction of Bitcoin might be going. But most likely it's going to be kind of falling into that. I also want to jump over to the Ethereum price prediction because this is something that a lot of people are looking at Ethereum as kind of the, the bit, or we'll call it the crypto twin out there in terms of how it tracks and has it been able to completely separate from Bitcoin. There was indications last week that Ethereum could be pretty much separating from Bitcoin, but I feel like based on what we've seen both in sentiment data, some of the volume trading, and also just in general, what the price action has been on Ethereum, it hasn't quite done it just yet. If you look here, Ethereum is enjoying a favorable tailwind that's going on in all cryptocurrencies. Obviously, we saw ADA moving this weekend. We saw XRP really taking a hard, and then of course Solana. Man, Solana just took off. Sellers are going to look for buyers that are going to be taking profit on on Ethereum. And this is one of those things. I think that around the $3,600 price, between $3,700, this I think is where we're going to see a little bit of pushback on Ethereum. And again, because of that, that could have some overarching sentiment hits on Bitcoin. And as you guys know, sentiment is very important on how Bitcoin really kind of moves along. And of course, I think that's where we are today. I want to jump over to Trade the Chain quickly just to see Bitcoin sentiment. Let me zoom in up here on this one. So trading right now, 46,463. Great market cap, 873 billion, and amazing what we've seen in terms of tweet volume. Down slightly, but you will see the 7-day sentiment on Trade the Chain really pulling out of the August 10th range, which is where we were seeing a lot of kind of flat action, into this lower range right here where we saw the price dip down to 44,000. And of course, sentiment kind of got pulled along with it, even though Bitcoin did make a little bit of a correction up to 45.8, almost 45. And then of course here on August 15th, where it clipped almost to 48,000. So here's the issue I think that we have to be watching, especially around sentiment, because there's some things that happen within the sentiment layers that often are not grabbed in many of these analysis tools that help kind of give you some indicators as to how this sentiment is flowing out in the price action, because that's really what we look at. I want to jump over to Bitcoin's price action chart with what we've been tracking over on TradingView. So this is something that we put together over the last few days and over the weekend. Thanks, Prasad, to help me out on this one. Sentiment was tracking right here. We did a little bubble on August 11th through the 12th, and this was running at 63.19. Still a very high sentiment score for Bitcoin. Amplification held on at 61.44. Again, a very solid position. But something happened right here in this zone, and our amplification was pretty much on point with where this was holding over the weekend. And there was this small little bubble that we pulled a sentiment score on at 64.12, kind of in the middle of this run. And amplification jumped again to 67.18, again, causing a little bit of a flume right here in what we're seeing in terms of the potential of where it could be going. It is rising a little bit from where the market is moving, and also from this last bubble right here, which was a 66.23. Also, what you'll see here is that both sentiment and amplification are climbing dramatically with Bitcoin. Now, remember that with sentiment, there's two things you have to watch for. One is when you get into a zone that you start to see flat lines, when sentiment is flaring, what happens is you'll usually see a little bit of a dip and a fall off. And right here, back to the chart, I'm looking for that to happen right about here. And this is going to be in about the $46,300 range, probably running down to the $44,000 to $43,000 range. If we start to see that kind of movement in and around, say, August 19th through the weekend, this weekend, that's where I could see a potential retracement for Bitcoin. And this is based on what we've been able to track. And remember, amplification has about a week before data gets a little bit mushy. We need to kind of follow it along and be able to pull that back in. You can look at long-term amplification if there's enough data there, even though Bitcoin does generate just a ridiculous amount of data on social. Remember, we're looking at all things on social from all different kinds of platforms other than just Twitter. So that has a lot of a bearing to it. Point being is that right now, if you are in Bitcoin at this point, I think we've got a little bit of sideways action moving right here that will probably maybe break that $48,000 mark this week and move us into the $49,000 range, which is where it's going to get very interesting, both on the scenario of some people taking some profits and then also some people looking at really ramping up because they feel like at this point we've got a run on our hands. And I think that's going to be the thing to watch. Obviously, we've got to get to that 52K mark. That really is going to be the breakout point. I think that really starts to skyrocket. Remember, and this kind of goes back to the whole aspect of where does the bull run end, and are we nearing the end? Maybe, we are at the new all-time high, at least when I say all-time high, since the recent all-time high back in May. So the question is when you look at bull runs and whether or not they're going to extend. This, I still look toward the end of the year. Because we had a little bit of a hiatus in the middle of the year or the middle of the summer, I feel like that we're going to see a little bit, and because of the activity we're seeing on sentiment, there does not seem to be a slowdown, and we're also seeing a ton of activity in the altcoins. All of these kind of things really kind of start to leverage toward a comparison of what the last year that we saw this happen in, and we went back and looked at some sentiment data on this. There's some similarities, but there was a lot less data in terms of sentiment scoring that was out there. When you look year over year, before we saw the big breakout towards the end of 2020, that is where we started really seeing sentiment fly in a big way, just because of the mass adoption of Bitcoin. So I think we're really looking to the fall to be able to score against that again, and that will come around September, October, before we'll be able to really score that run up in comparison to what we saw back in December last year, of course, when Bitcoin started flying. So I think as we look, a little bit of softness here on Bitcoin unless we see a major move. And when I look at major moves, I just want to jump to one story right here. This was Twitter, of course, jumping in and saying, hey, we're going to drop in the former Zcash dev head to basically manage Twitter Blue Sky, which essentially is the platform in which Twitter is going to be launching some sort of cryptocurrency platform within social media, whether they tie it to authentication or tie it to some sort of content creation model, or maybe it becomes a payment model within for e-commerce. There's a lot of speculation as where that's going, but Jay Graber is the person who is going to lead Twitter's initiative to develop an open and decentralized standard for social. I can't wait to see some of this moving in this direction. There's going to be a lot of action, I think, happening around where social is going to be going, but also content creation. I mean, we've also looked at several different projects out there that kind of lean toward this. One we want to learn about is Audius, which is the one for kind of the audio version of how content creation might be coming in. Let me know in the comments below which projects that you guys might be interested in. We are starting to create a bit of an index now because of the sentiment data and scoring this against some of the tokenomics and the metrics of some of these projects, because there's so many projects that are coming out. We are going to be doing something very, very cool, I think, that you guys are going to be loving. So make sure and stay tuned for that. Before we get out of here, though, I want to jump over to ETH, because this is one of those that I think a lot of you have kind of said, well, how does this kind of compare to where Bitcoin is running? This was the ETH sentiment that we ran back here in July, and it ran up to around July 20th, where we saw that 59.64 and that amplification range at 60, which was a rise from what we had seen. And then August 9th, we updated that into 63.71, continuing to see rise and lift. This was our update amplification back on August, let's look here, yep, right at August 9th right here. And then this was our prediction. And as you can kind of see, zooming in on that a little bit, you can kind of see where our prediction is holding really dead in the zone of where our amplification is moving. So we are right in the pocket. What happens right here for you ETH holders, this is very important. Let me kind of jump to my chart, is I have to start worrying around August, I'm going to say 17th, right here in this range right here is where it starts to get a little bit narrow in terms of amplification. If we see some movement, again, that starts to broaden that out, there's an opportunity here. And I think the key here is going to be time, because that's what we need with ETH to really kind of mature through August and September to get into that range of where I think we're going to see ETH starting to crack above the $4,000 mark. And that's probably going to happen right out here in this zone as we get past these troubled waters, right in this spot right here. Looks like a happy face. Anyway, so let's just, if you are holding ETH and you are acquiring, maybe this is a good time to be hanging in there, but it's also maybe a great opportunity. I know I'm purchasing more ETH, which we've continued to see a lot of action on the market in terms of ETH's market cap, but also just the trade action that we've seen in terms of volume. So good stuff for Ethereum. And of course, I think just because of Cardano and also some of the altcoin projects that are moving, it just creates kind of that whole space around Ethereum that people get very inquisitive. And also, we are seeing some consolidation, because that's the other thing we all are interested in. And this is something that I'm kind of preaching to a lot of our inner circle of people that we talk to, is are you moving to more cash and more crypto? Because I still feel we're going to start to see a big market correction in the traditional markets. And if that does happen, I feel like crypto and cash are going to be the two big key elements that you've got to be able, mainly so you can be prepping for buying the dip. And I know that is something that a lot of you do: buy low, sell high. And the key here is understanding when to start moving out of traditional markets. I've started taking a little bit of profit in the traditional markets, moving some of that cash into Bitcoin. Again, remember, these are market movers. We do these from time to time. The key here is we put together a few stories. We drop in some research for you, and of course, give you some analysis that kind of gives you a direction of where you might be going. But remember, best of all, this is not financial advice. You guys should be out there doing your own research, but hopefully this gets you going in the right direction and gives you some tips on where to look, what to watch out for, and hopefully gets you ready to look at your own portfolio and make some money moves. All right, you guys are listening in over on the podcast right now. Make sure and give us some stars over there. If you're here on YouTube, make sure and subscribe right now. We love your feedback. We also love your ideas too. Man, I've been getting just crazy ideas. I got to do one of these on a recent tip we got on LinkedIn that came across directly to me. I was blown away by this listener and reviewer or viewers' insights on where the crypto market was going. He was asking what I thought were some of the smartest questions ever that I've listened to or viewed on our channel. It's pretty amazing. You guys are doing just absolute stellar work. So keep up the great work out there. If you want to reach out to me, you can hit me up on LinkedIn, just like he did, or hit me up on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.